Or
Yeah.
And we are live.
Hey there, everybody.
I'm
Hello there,
still
everybody.
alive.
Hello, everyone.
Hidely ho.
Ooh, I can't wait for the hip new catchphrase. It's going to be happening tonight. That's going to be a thing too.
Oh, yeah.
Howdy hi.
I better go find one.
Ask Chat GPT.
Yeah.
The topic is Trek podcast. I have to find the live stream that's happening. I heard it's a pretty good podcast.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
gonna go watch. Oh, they're live right now. I should go watch.
Ooh. Hey, this is very meta all of a sudden. Especially if it's on Facebook, it's very meta. So that's another story.
Okay.
All right.
Shared, and we'll see if anyone shows up.
Okay. So behind the scenes stuff here, because some of the stories are long, I break it up into round robin reading of it.
Sure.
Mhm.
And so you know whether or not you're the person's going to wrap it up. I put down like 1 of 2, 2 of 2, 3 of 2, or, 3 of 2. That certainly doesn't help. But
Director's notes.
Yes.
1 of 14.
100.
Strap in, people. It's going to be a long show. No, it won't be that bad. Okay. You ready to begin?
I am.
All right. I'm got my finger on the button. That doesn't sound good at all, does it?
No, it doesn't. Ready? Yeah, I'll cut myself in. I'll do it live. Here we go.
3, 2, 1.
This is The Topic is Trek, episode 180 for Friday, April 18th, 2025. Coming up in this episode, more award love for Lower Decks. A species we've talked about a lot on this show is about to hit the big time. The Star Trek IV probe has a whale of a tale to tell us. All that and more right now on The Topic is Trek. About that alien probe. Welcome to The Topic is Trek, the podcast that runs on impulse power. Join us for a journey where no show has gone before. If it has to do with Star Trek, there's a good chance we'll talk about it sooner or later, because on this show, the topic is Trek. Engage already. Ba-da-boom. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another thrill-packed edition of The Topic is Trek. I'm Clinton, one of your co-hosts, and in order to be a co-host, there always have to be other hosts who are also co-hosts. So we don't really have any hosts. We have... here comes Craig.
He was uninvited.
Okay, so you ready for the catchphrase?
Ready for the hip new catchphrase that all the kids are talking about.
Probing. It's not just for doctors anymore.
Well, it's appropriate for this week. I don't know if it really would work in every situation, but
they're going to be saying it tomorrow like crazy.
Absolutely. And Mr. Fast on the transporter himself, Chuck Tomasi.
Hey, it happens to every instant every now and then.
Well, it's...
when you're sitting down here in the transporter room and nothing's happening all day.
All right, O'Brien.
Right.
All right. Well, before we begin with stuff, Craig, you said you had a little story you want to let us know about.
Yeah, really, it's my wife's story, but I wanted to share it. She had gone to the laundromat the other day, and so she was there, and as she was folding her laundry, she noticed an older couple there, and the gentleman, apparently he was having dementia or maybe Alzheimer's. I'm not sure. She wasn't sure either, but he was just kind of there while the lady was folding her laundry, and she was mentioning that he was having trouble remembering stuff. And then, so she was talking to the attendant that works at the laundromat. Well, as Kim was folding our clothes, it had there was I had worn a pair of those Star Trek socks, the blue ones with the Delta shield on the side.
Mhm.
And he started saying sock, 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 and they thought he was saying sock, and they were like, "What is going on here?" He was saying Spock,
Ah,
and Star Trek. I guess he was a fan at some point, or I'd seen it plenty times. It triggered something in him, and uh, between Kim hearing that story about him not remembering things and everything, all the women there were crying because he was remembering Spock from Star Trek. So I just thought it was a cute little story, but it was also interesting that something like that would,
well, it's
cue
also
off somebody's brain.
it's also helpful. I mean, I don't know if the family knew that already. They probably did, but um, it's something that you could possibly even talk about him with, right? He might
Mhm.
remember enough to like have a conversation, at least about the original series. Might not, about other stuff, but you know, anything you can do to engage someone in that condition, I think is a
Sure.
good thing. So yeah.
I told her, I said, why didn't you just give him the socks? He could have kept on. You could have just, I wouldn't care.
Yeah, I wouldn't say don't pitch the podcast to him. I don't think that's a good
Yeah.
idea.
Here, no, here's a web address. You
Yeah.
go there and you can
No, you
listen.
don't have to write this down. You can
That was
remember
my
this,
first
right?
question.
No,
Is
it's fine.
were you shilling the podcast?
Yeah. No, I told her that I said you could have just given him the socks. Maybe it was important to. I don't know. Who knows?
Well, like I said, I think it's more important again if the family, realized this and went, this is something helpful. That's good.
Hmm.
How did you know he was talking about Spock when all he was saying was sock, sock, sock? I mean, he was in a laundromat after all.
They thought he was saying sock, but he was saying Spock.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, everybody thought he was saying sock, sock, and Kim realized, oh, he's saying Spock.
Gotcha.
Because it clued in. So anyway, I just thought that was really cool.
Yes.
Next, they thought he was saying jerk, jerk, jerk.
Kirk is a jerk.
Hey, I remember that episode.
Yeah. Of course, by the way, when we're on the cruise, of course, there's always that one person that has the Kirk is a jerk shirt.
And you have to go, because you got to put your hand over your mouth because we can't animate that. So it's,
Wasn't that Darren? This year?
Actually, you know what? I think it was Darren now that I think about it.
That one person.
Yeah.
He's our friend.
Well,
not after that stunt.
I didn't remember who was wearing it, but yes, I consider him a friend. He was wearing it. That's right.
All right. Well, what do you
He
say?
was that one guy, right?
He was that one guy.
Yeah.
Speaking of one guy, we're about to start Subspace Chatter, and there's one guy that we have to get an approval from, or at least we pretend we have to get approval from him. So we have to check with Charlie. And again, we don't know if it's going to be Charlie X or Mirror Charlie. Bad, good. We shall see. So, Charlie, are we all set to go ahead with Subspace Chatter?
You don't need all that subspace chatter.
Oh,
He's
school.
back.
Charlie
Yeah,
X is back again.
he shaved.
He did. Well, no, he's not. He never had the goatee. That's the Charlie we like.
No, it's when it grows out, then he changes to the good one.
Ah.
He shaves and then he goes back to the.
He didn't. It's not a beard. He's just drinking chocolate milk.
Guys, you're making fun of him.
It's like those pictures you see of kids where the sibling wrote on magic marker all over his set.
Or the binoculars with the.
He
think
drank
he's
too much, and everybody put.
Charlie, if you're listening, I wasn't making fun of you. So if you guys disappear into the
Yeah.
cornfield, that's
We are. Sky's blue. What are you gonna do?
What?
all right.
Why does your avatar come up with your?
I just noticed that. Look at there.
What is that? That's me.
I don't know. I think I got a bug
We've lost
here.
control already, and we just started the show.
Did you? What happens when I turn mine up? Okay, that's just wrong.
Oh, it has to do with the account.
Oh, we're all signed in with this. Anyway,
Yeah.
So
Anyway.
on account of we're going to do Subspace Chatter. See what
We
I did
are.
there? Yes. I'll start us off. First up, Lower Decks keeps racking up award nominations.
Mm.
The series just picked up 2 Hugo Award nominations, and IDW picked up a nomination for their Warp Your Own Way graphic novel. Lower Decks has 2 nominations in the World Science Fiction category for Best Dramatic Presentation Short Form. The 2 nominations were for the penultimate Season 5 episode, Fissure Quest, written by Lauren McGuire and directed by Brandon Williams, and the series finale, The New Next Generation, written by series creator and showrunner Mike McMahon and directed by Megan Lloyd. The 2 Lower Decks episodes are competing against episodes from the streaming series Fallout, Agatha All Along, and also Doctor Who. As you may recall, Lower Decks is also a finalist for a Nebula Award in a category that also includes Doctor Who.
Nice. I'm still stuck on the first line. I want to write the rest of the song. Warp, you can warp your own way.
You can't afford those royalties, don't
Yeah.
you?
Shut up.
No, I'm going to have that parody done in the morning.
All right.
Continuing on, this is the second year Lower Decks has been nominated for a Hugo. The first was on for the season 2 episode Wedge Judge in 2022. Also nominated for a Hugo for Best Graphic Story or Comic is IDW's interactive graphic novel, Star Trek Lower Decks, Warp Your Own Way. It's just going to keep going through my head now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks, news writer. Written by
There's
Ray
nothing
North
else in there, so
and with art by Chris Fenoglio. It was up against fellow nominees The Deep Dark, The Hunger and the Dusk, Volume 1, Monstrous, Volume 9, My Favorite Thing is Monsters, Book 2, and We Call Them Giants. Good luck to all the finalists, but mostly Lower Decks.
yeah. All right. Well, the wait is practically over after years of development. The Wand Company has announced that they're going to begin selling their replica TOS tricorder. This is a working replica of the tricorder device seen in the original Star Trek television show. It was created using detailed scans of the actual prop from 1960 series to closely resemble the original look and feel. Made from materials including plastic, aluminum, this replica features sounds from the show. It can measure surroundings, display information, and allows users to record logs. It includes a strap and a display stand.
The tricorder will sell for $350 US plus shipping and taxes where they apply. Initially, the product will be sold through Amazon UK, but can ship to the United States. A number of tricorders will also be available to order or pre-order from StarTrek.com and at a future date through the IGN store. We'll have a link to the product information page in the show notes for episode 180 about that alien probe over at thetopicIstrek.com.
I told him I already got one. Just a month after the Nacelle Company opened pre-orders for its first wave of Star Trek action figures, we're learning about the second wave of character releases coming later this year, and it's a lot. We've learned that the previously announced Captain Kirk from Star Trek Generations will come with the following accessories: his breakfast eggs, dillweed, and an axe and stump to chop firewood.
You hit the little button on his back and he...
How do you package dillweed in with for an action figure anyway? Plus, the figure
Hey,
will
you
also,
work with the little bit they've got to work with here, like
Yeah.
2 scenes.
what were they? Cartelian eggs or something? They were some kind of eggs. Anyway, plus the figure will also come with a horse for Kirk to ride. He had to see a man about a horse, apparently.
Mhm.
Nacelle has confirmed that they're expanding Wave 2 and beyond to 10 figures per wave, up from the 8 figures in Wave 1.
All right. So joining Kirk will be Captain Catherine Janeway from Year of Hell, wearing her signature purple-gray tank top from the episode. Then we get more Generations figures with both Worf and Geordi LaForge wearing their 19th century sailing ship uniforms. And if T'Pol showing up is in Lower Decks had you wondering if she'll ever get an action figure, the answer is yes. She'll be wearing her season 3 button uniform, and joining her in this set will also be that traitor from to the Federation, Valaris, wearing a monster maroon.
The Romulan commander from the TOS episode Balance of Terror is up next, along with Carol Marcus from The Wrath of Khan, Ensign Nog from Deep Space Nine, and finally, in the continuing effort to bring Star Trek the Animated Series back into the family, that green-skinned multi-part character, Ari Ben Bem from the self-titled episode of TOS.
Does he come apart?
TOS.
Is it multi-part toy?
I
hope so.
They haven't said, but I mean, how could you not? That's his shtick.
It has to be. You have to be able to take it apart.
The second wave of Nacelle Star Trek figures are expected to go up for pre-order later in 2025. In the meantime, fans in the United States can still pre-order Wave 1 figures at nacellestore.com.
Now, Nog, can you take his leg on and off?
Oh, too soon, man. Too soon.
Oh, Craig.
Well,
soon.
they got all these other weird characters in.
Hey,
Yeah.
there's nothing weird about
No,
dill with an action figure or breakfast eggs. What are you talking about?
I never had an action figure with any spice.
Except those Spice Girls ones, but that's another story.
But
Oh yeah, true.
All right. Paramount Plus has released the teaser trailer for the upcoming 3rd season of Strange New Worlds. Like most teasers, it's a mix of random dialogue and images that tell you what will be happening. Unless, of course, the teaser is misleading you with shots from several different episodes strung together with voiceover dialogue from an additional episode. Nah, I'm sure it's fine.
Mhm.
We already know that season 3 will pick up right where season 2 left off, since Paramount released a clip from that episode. And we know that there will be an episode that finds Captain Pike, Uhura, Lon, and Chapel turned into Vulcans. We've already seen that clip too. But the trailer gives us other glimpses into what is to come in season 3. For instance, we see the crew, including the interloper from the USS Farragut, James D. Kirk. He's like the brother-in-law that won't leave. You're still here? On a cheesy 1960s era spaceship dressed in costume that seemed to be from around that same time. So think Captain Proton meets TOS. Or maybe more like the USS Callister from Black Mirror meets Strange New Worlds. Now that is exactly what I was thinking of when I saw that. So big surprises include what appears to be a TNG era holodeck. True, the rec room in TAS was a rudimentary holodeck, and Discovery used holographic projectors during phaser training, but the room we see in the classic TNG, black walls with the yellow grid lines. Based on what Lon was wearing in the shot, as well as subsequent clips, this appears to be all from the murder mystery episode that Jonathan Frakes directed.
Mhm. We also see our first live action Idosian. Yay!
Yay!
Yay.
The central limb looks to be a bit off center, but that seems to be a compromise so that the character can be live action. The Idosian is tending bar at what appears to be a centennial celebration for the United Federation of Planets. There appear to be romantic rekindlings for Spock and Chapel as well, if what we are seeing is what we are seeing. Plus, Uhura seems to have a romantic interest as well. Patton Oswalt shows up, and what is it made better but with a little dose of Patton Oswalt in it, right?
Right.
And finally, in a brief clip, we see that we may get confirmation of a fan theory. It looks like actor Rhys Darby will be playing Trelane.
Mm.
His outfit, down to the mutton chops, sideburns, definitely lead us to believe this. It's very Trelane from the Squire of Gothos. And he is about to snap his fingers. Are we also confirming the fan theory that Trelane is a member of the Q Continuum? Actually, there was confirmation in a recent Star Trek comic, but as always, that's beta canon. It appears on screen, it may be true.
Mm.
Ooh.
Sweet. My prediction was right.
Mm.
Lots of questions, but the biggest one, when will it premiere? As of now, all we know is summer. We don't know what year yet.
Well, hopefully. I think it said this summer at least. We can. I think it said
There was
that.
an indication a few weeks ago that would mean August 1st, but that was sort of walked back. I'm not convinced of that either because August 1st is a Friday, not a Thursday.
Hmm. True.
We'll see. When we hear when the premiere date is, we'll certainly let you know if it's not all over the interwebs by the time we tell you.
Yeah.
Well, since they usually go on Thursday, and so do we, we'll know that day.
Well, that's. I mean, a little advance warning would help. I think.
Yeah, surely. Why are they being so coy about it?
I don't know. I don't know whether they're still trying to figure out, whether it's going to be the last week of July, first week of August. What they're going to go up against. It might be premiering. I don't know.
It's going to come out when we're partying at Dragon Con.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably so.
Yeah. All
Quick,
right. Well,
grab a microphone. We'll record anything.
yeah,
Yes.
that's right.
Take this show, for example. But anyway.
Yeah. We'll do anything. In a commercial that is part Star Trek, part 2001 Space Odyssey, and part promo for an activewear line, Zendaya recently premiered in a commercial, Zone Dreamers. Prepping for the commercial, the multi-franchise actress suddenly sports pointed ears and joins her otherworldly friends in an adventure that takes them from the edge of the galaxy all the way to dinner that serves pizza. That would be Millie Ways at the end of the universe, right?
Yeah.
Diner.
Yeah.
You said dinner.
This is a diner.
A dinner.
Well, dinner at a diner is a
Diner.
Where's diner short?
Da-da-da-da-da-da.
The diner at the end of the universe. Well, we'll have a link to the video in the show notes for episode 180 about that alien probe, over at the topicisttrek.com.
And finally, CinemaCon, an actual convention. It's not for us. It's for the National Association of Theater Owners, concluded last week in Las Vegas. Representatives from all the major studios and several of the minor ones gave presentations on their upcoming movie releases. As you may recall, at 2024's presentation, Paramount announced that the not yet titled Star Trek movie centered around the foundation of the Federation that was going to be coming out, and it was going to be directed by Toby Haynes from a script by Seth Grahame-Smith. It was slated for the 2025-2026 season, which we couldn't figure out what exactly time that is. Anyway, well, Paramount was at CinemaCon again this year. The presentation included mentions of the next Mission Impossible movie, the reboot of the Naked Gun series, this time with Liam Neeson playing the part of Detective Frank Drebin.
Yeah.
The remake of The Running Man, the next SpongeBob SquarePants movie. Oh, we're just going to cut to the chase. There was no mention of the Star Trek movie at all.
Wah, 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 wah.
Which isn't surprising since we have heard nothing about casting or commencement of filming, both of which really should have happened by now to meet the premiere date anytime in 2026. We're not calling this one the latest casualty in the failure of Paramount to get Trek movie out the door, but it's not looking good.
Hey, you said CinemaCon was not for us, it was for theater owners, but I think increasingly it's becoming for everybody because actually this year a lot of Superman and a lot of other footage was leaked, and then they had to go ahead and push out the trailer to everybody so they could see it. So, and a lot of news kept dropping. I was like, this is actually more for everybody, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's all hype really at that point. They're trying to, the studios are trying to hype it to the theater owners.
True. Yeah.
And so I think that that's now spilling over into just the general public as well.
Right.
I don't really have a big update on, I'm not going to do a whole section about the section about the battle for Paramount Mountain. Just know that as we discussed last time, the April 7th deadline to have the merger happen has come and gone, and no merger, but a reminder that there are 2 90-day extensions built in, and we're in the first of those 90-day extensions right now. So we have until, I think it's sometime at the beginning of October before we have to go, what's going to happen now? We've got plenty of time. So plenty of time for them to change their mind and put out a Star Trek movie and, get it completely written and made and out the door in like a year and a half. Star Trek, the motion picture. I remember it well.
Not too many news stories this week either.
No, we only have links to 168 additional stories.
You can do better.
Exactly, Erickson. I don't know. I'm really getting up my hopes here that we'll see Eric's on screen if we're getting into Doge and, I just,
He's
I
got to
like-
make an appearance. Come on.
Number 159 caught my eye. Podcast. A denobulin, a Vorta, a Ferengi, a human, and a producer walk for pancreatic cancer. I'm guessing that's Jeffrey Combs.
I thought you were going to say walk into a bar.
well,
I was going to as I was reading it the first
I
time.
think that's what they were going for, is the catchy headline.
Yeah, right.
All right. With all that said, it's time for one of my favorite parts of the show. And that's when I get to say goodbye, Charlie X.
I want to stay.
No.
Just no.
You've been voted off the island.
I hate him so much. I hate him. No.
All right, what's our main mission? Oh,
All right, well,
we need an appropriate sound effect, don't we?
We do indeed. That's good enough. Good enough.
Com channel's open.
Okay, so why don't I have who wants to take on reading the background data here?
I'll do it.
Okay.
So we're covering Star Trek novel called Probe. The hardcover was first published in April of 1992. It was written by Margaret Wander Bonanno, and she was the author of 6 Star Trek novels, as well as contributing to stories to 2 Trek miniseries, Mere Anarchy and The Mirror Universe. Ooh. So Bonanno disavowed authorship of the novel Probe, as large portions of the novel were rewritten by several others, including Jean Deweese.
It might be
Weiss.
Deweese.
Hmm.
She would mail the manuscript to her submitted novel, Music of the Spheres, to interested fans, as well as donate copies to charity auctions. I was able to track down a PDF copy thanks to a link from Women at Warp. Ironically, that podcast has just wrapped up production.
Well, warped. That's good too.
I think
They
that
warped
worked.
on out of here.
Yeah.
But that's what we do at the end of the show.
Yeah.
But here at the Topic is Trek, we still want to give them a shout out, and you can still listen to past episodes by going to womenatwarp.com. We'll have a link in the show notes with a link to Bonanno's manuscript for Music of the Spheres. So here's the short plot synopsis. An epic length novel that at last picks up the story of the USS Enterprise and her crew where Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, left off. Save the whales. A novel that reveals the secrets behind the mysterious probe that almost destroyed Earth, and whose reappearance sends Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, and their shipmates into unparalleled danger.
Will Robinson.
Unparalleled.
Yeah.
An unsurpassed discovery.
Okay.
Take it away, Clinton. You read it. Craig and I listened to the abridged audio version, so
Well-
we'll have some contribution.
Although, before you start, I want to say what you wrote here, Clinton, about the problems. She's disavowed the book, and then what Chuck and I have discussed slightly. We were saving most of it for the show about our interest in the story. This doesn't bode well. Like it wasn't a good experiment. I don't think.
Well, I'm going to do a review of the manuscript as well. Not tonight because I got it far too late to get through that as well. So when I do a review of that, perhaps in the next episode, because it won't be that long, what I want to do is just say, oh, the stuff we talked about here, well, actually it's not in there, or, that type of thing, or it goes in this direction rather than that direction, whatever those changes are between the two. And we'll get into the story then, as well as, well, what really happened here? Why is her name on the cover
Mm-hmm.
and she didn't write it, or she said 7% of the story is what she actually turned in as her manuscript. We will get into all that, including why her name is on the cover, and it's not for the reason you think. Believe me. All right. This is a tough one to do for me because this book, before knowing the backstory here of the actual book itself, it was a tough nut to crack trying to do a review because it's all over the place. It's a little bit of this, it's a little bit of that. And so I don't want to go through an entire plot synopsis of it. When I was first going to be doing it, and in happier days before I learned these, what was going on with this book, I was going to introduce some of the characters. Like the first two characters I was going to introduce are the John and Jandra,
Right.
who they're Romulans because this story involves Romulans and
Vulcans.
and some Vulcans and the Federation.
Mhm.
So we have these two twins, and what I was going to do is, okay, so they will be represented as, here the Wonder Twins.
Wonder Twins.
Because
Form of Crystal.
Well, form of Horda.
because the John he's an archaeologist, and we find out that he was banished to do exploring, do excavation on these these worlds at the edge of the Romulan Empire, and his twin sister Jandra is a virtuoso musician, and when I say virtuoso, I mean a piano happened to make its way into the family home.
That's right.
And the piano was like the spoils of some raid on some Federation, something or other. She listened to somebody playing it, and then she sat down, and they all laughed down when she sat at the piano until she started to play, because from memorization and never having played the piano before, she plays note for note perfectly the entire piece that was the
And
person
it's
that
not
played.
Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. It was a complex piece. Was Tchaikovsky or something? It was.
Yeah. She
Yeah.
learned to play the different parts to it too.
So she goes off to get sent off to school and to foster this, and but she ends up being banished as well, and we find out that it's a family affair, because what happened was their brother, who was going to be Gleek, was going to be,
Yeah. Right.
because you got to keep them family, right? He's deceased, and he was in charge of a command of forces on Kalis 3, and things went horribly wrong there. He ends up dead. Their parents end up having being killed as well. They commit ritual death, and so this whole family is just like off away with all of it. They're put into what they call rehabilitation, which is probably good, destined to be to last for the rest of their lives. So, okay, well, that's great. You've got these characters who are nowhere in the story. How's that going to work out? Well, interestingly enough, at the beginning of this story, by the way, you notice I haven't mentioned the probe yet. At the beginning of the story, we find out that suddenly they're called back to Romulus, because they've now been suddenly reinstated. And John,
a change of leadership or something
yes, what happened is that the praetor had died.
That's right.
Okay. And there was then this power struggle, of course, as one character points out. When isn't there a power struggle, and when isn't there backstabbing going on? But a group that tentatively has control of the government wants to push in the direction of peace with the Federation. So part of that plan involves these twins, and we'll see why, have to be brought back from their exile, if you will. Now, Jandra, through a marriage of convenience to be part of her rehabilitation, is married to a character named Tiem, and I wasn't sure. I think Tiem I was going to have down as Duff Man, because he's just like full of hot air.
Yeah.
And
Duff Man.
so he suddenly becomes, instead of this lowly administrative worker, he is now going to be leading a delegation to meet with the Federation to have the first overtures for peace between them. Now, alarms are clearly going off in the reader's head, as well as they should be going off in his head about, but why would I be put in charge of this? But of course, since he's Duff Man, because I'm me, and clearly they can see how brilliant I am,
Right.
type of thing. All right, so before we go any further with the story of these Romulans and the cast of characters that would shock even Cecil B. DeMille. The probe itself, we're now this is just past the end of Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home.
Mhm.
And the probe is headed back out from Earth, and Earth is recovering. Earth is very, very green right now because a lot of water fell everywhere because the probe was again trying to
Boil the ocean.
The probe, we find out in its internal dialogue, what had happened was the probe was sent out by what it refers to as the creators, and we don't have any other name for the creators. Its mission was to, but this is going to sound an awful like some other things, but its mission was to go out and seek out other life. What the creators were wanting the probe to do was to find another species somewhere in the galaxy who could speak what they called the true language. And that's a phrase for most of the book, the true language. What does that mean? Now, in its internal monologue, it had come across several possible candidates on alien worlds that someday might be able to develop this ability to speak the true language. What it would do, it was make note of that, and as it made its circle around to all the different worlds, it would be sure to check in on those worlds to see what was happening there.
Did a first pass and then come around.
Right. And usually be like, I think in the book, it talked about it would be like a millennium before it might get back to any particular place, which makes sense because you need to have time for something to happen. It would also, through method that really wasn't explained in the book, try to nudge whatever the species was in the direction of being able to develop this ability.
Here's your stock picks.
Yeah.
Here's some flashcards. Good luck.
Now,
his flippers.
Yeah.
Now, if the species suddenly was gone, its directive was to essentially wipe the slate clean to make way for the rise of something new on that planet. And that's what we see the probe doing in Star Trek IV. It's trying to contact the whales, and the whales just aren't there no matter what happens. So it's going to, humanity and everything else on Earth is just going to wipe it out. But it is confused because all of a sudden it hears whales again, randomly out of nowhere, and it can't figure out what to do about that because, well, they weren't there and suddenly they are there. So I have to stop destroying the planet because they're there.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go away again. I'm going to go away now, but I'm not going to come back in a millennium. I'm going to come back in about a decade and check on what's going on here. So we now have a ticking time bomb because now, of course, when they come back, George and Gracie are there. Although Gracie's absent from this book for some reason.
As is the baby.
Yeah. We just talk about George, that Spock tries to communicate with George because he's trying to.
She was at the grocery store.
Get some more information about. She was at the hospital. She was having pains.
And George was away doing his own thing.
Yeah, saying I'm gonna hang up with my bro Spock. Spock knew that he couldn't get, clear thoughts from George about what happened with the probe and what this connection.
Yeah, because this will be the time that he would communicate with the whale again after everything happened, not before.
Right.
Like, you know,
And even the first time he was really just getting impressions. He got the impression that Gracie was pregnant. Right. So in this case, he gets the impression from George that, first of all, George can't distinguish between the probe's actions and the actions of the crew on board, the bird of prey when they pick up George and bring it back, because they're all things that it wouldn't understand. So it can't really separate that stuff out. But it has the impression of something that was familiar, something that it anticipated, and it anticipated it might return at some point, which
mhm.
wouldn't be obviously within George's lifetime in the millennium cycle of things, but it certainly would be within 10 years. All right. So what happens here is, with this change of government and this tentative hold that the people who were going for peace, they start to do a bunch of things that get equated in the book to glasnost and perestroika. We're familiar with the Soviet Union during the fall
Mhm.
of that. So that's a kind of a tie in there as well. They're releasing political prisoners. They're giving people free speech. They're inviting these people back into into the city. All these types of things are going on, and they want to have a meeting between representatives of the Romulan Empire and the Federation, which sounds great, except everybody is really suspicious of this,
Yeah.
including, ironically enough, Admiral Cartwright, who we have in this thing. Now, I'm
Yes.
trying to remember. I can't remember the timing on this about where it came out in relationship to Star Trek VI.
Right.
But it's really weird because Cartwright, and then maybe I'm reading too much into it, and I don't know what was in your very shortened audiobook version of this, but he's very tentative about it, and he seems a little tense about it.
Mhm.
And I can't tell if he's tense about it because he's already having these first inklings of I don't like all this stuff that's going on
Yeah.
here, and this is kind of leading him down the path that we see him end up at in
Yeah.
Star Trek VI.
Well, when I was listening to it and I heard his name, I went, "Wait, he can't be there." And I went, "Wait a minute, lost track of
Between
where
4 and
this."
6. Yeah.
Yeah, but it did catch me for a second. But I think Eric, Chuck, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that most of what you were just describing as about part of the story up until now
Mhm.
was in that audiobook, which was adapted, and I'm using air quotes. That's what it says. It's an adapted, not abridged or anything like that. It's an adapted. So
That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So I think that this is a subset of the story that we're talking about of the book.
All right. So in order, because this is a TOS story, of course, the Federation ship that's going is the Enterprise to this meeting.
Yeah.
And the Romulan ship is a ship called the Galtese,
Mhm.
which is captained by, let's see, do I have him in here? I think it's the one I got done. There we go. Is by Commander Heron, who's the captain of the ship, and until recently, his second in command on the ship was Ren, who was also his wife, who was killed when the crew managed to put down a nasty rebellion with minimal casualties. Now, I mentioned this with minimal casualties because I don't know, again, the audiobook might make this clearer or it might make it more obtuse. And I'm going to jump way ahead with this because this isn't necessarily a blow-by-blow review of this thing. But we have several conversations while the conference is going on that take place between Kirk and Heron.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the book, or very near the end of the book, he's talking about, well, things have fallen apart here. Big spoiler alert. Of course, they've fallen apart. We know that because we know that Romulans are still the enemy, later on. But that, there are methods of getting information to and from the Romulan Empire. Matter of fact, Cartwright is getting a lot of this from his contact in the Romulan Empire. And it's very broken up. It's hard to hear the recording. So I get the impression that Heron is that person who's speaking with Cartwright, because he then says, and Cartwright won't be around forever. Some other admiral,
Right.
Yeah.
indicating Kirk, might need a friend as well.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Towards the end, they did that.
So was that the impression you got, that he is the contact? I mean, especially when he's like, he seemed to be an awful lot on the side of the Federation, or listening to the Federation, and he puts down a rebellion, but with minimal casualties.
Mhm.
So I don't know. That's just the impression that I got.
Interesting insight. I did not pick up on that.
Yeah, I didn't either, but after you laid it out, it kind of makes sense.
And one of the characters that we meet at this point, when we get introduced to the captain of the Galtese, is Sub Commander Ferrick. Now, first of all, I laughed because, I'm not sure if Sean Ferrick knows that he's in this book, but hopefully he doesn't get too excited, because in the book, you forget that there is a Sub Commander Ferrick for the majority of the story. He's referenced at the beginning, and then he shows up a bit later on. You go, oh yeah,
Yeah,
that guy.
that guy. Yeah, actually, I think that happened in the audiobook as well.
So and that happens an awful lot in this book. First of all, Chekhov gets really, really minimal, I'll call it screen time, for lack of a better term.
Yep.
Screen time.
He's in like 2 scenes, and both of which play around his accent and, the cliche that he always says of like, oh, it's a Russian invention type of thing.
Yeah,
Uhura gets more to do, but I thought it was weird, because a lot of this book, and the original title of this book when it was first submitted was Music of the Spheres. A lot of this book is musical. That's not a musical, but it centers around themes of music, musical patterns, things like that. And of course, Uhura sings. We've
Yep.
seen her sing on more than one occasion,
yep.
but they don't play it up as much as I think they should. It's like the connection is there to have that. And she's able to hear something that Chandra is able to hear, who's a virtuoso and can pick up really, really things that are really, really minimal. But Uhura is the second person to pick it up. And I thought, okay, that's good. But, other than that, she seems wasted as far as, anything about that.
I thought that point where the probe talking to the whales, the whole musical tie-in, I thought that was pretty creative, actually, that there could be a culture that is based not on a language, but on music.
Well, yeah, whale song. Yeah, of course.
Well, the creators took it even. Well, no, I'm sorry. Okay, let me take that back. I'm going to take it forward at the same time. We talked about the creators. Now, the other people that make it into this book because of where the conference is taking place, and let's take the last one that I have here. Nope. Other way. There we go. The conference is taking place on Temerus 4. And Temerus 4 is in Romulan space, but in the neutral zone. And Romulans picked it. Romulans do a lot of the laying out the rules and a lot of suggestions about what's going to happen at this thing, which is, it makes a bit more sense as the story goes along about why were there all these rules involved with this.
Right.
But also on this planet are the ruins of the I'm going to say Edosians, and that's not right. The Arisian
Mhm.
Empire. And this is a very, very, it's not empire, it's the ascendancy, right? They are one of those species in Star Trek that people believe, we are probably possibly the descendants of this culture. And apparently some people think it's the Romulans, some people think of the humans, some Vulcans, and somebody says, look, half the civilizations this side of Antares claim the Eurasians as their ancestors. So, but there's never been a body of an Eurasian ever found, dug up at any sites. There's never been any pictures of who the Eurasians are. So for the archaeologists, and we already talked about the fact that Dajan, the brother of the Wonder Twins, is an archaeologist. So he's going to be going there all excited about the fact that he can be digging on this planet. But on the Federation side, we're bringing along, let's see, I'm trying to find my giant cast of characters here. Dr. Audrey Benar. And Dr. Audrey Benar, when Uhura goes to tell her you've been invited, because she was a person that she didn't necessarily have to be there, the Romulans said, but they would prefer that she was there, which led to
issues.
Which led to an interesting conversation about, I think it was McCoy that says like, I see reverse psychology,
Yeah.
And they said, or reverse psychology, or, they're saying she doesn't have to be there, because she has done archaeological digs. However, she did an archaeological dig on a planet that the Romulans came along, took her and her entire team prisoner, tortured them, did experiments on them, and they all ended up dead except for her. They did mind experiments, all sorts of, horrible things for an entire year. So she is the only one to escape. She goes to Vulcan and essentially learns how to put it in a box. Like she learns how to tap down all those emotions. And she ends up with a gig being the assistant conductor at the Lincoln Center, which is where Uhura goes to pick her up. And I thought, okay, this is great. We got Uhura's like, listen to the stuff. That's where I knew the beginning of the story. I'm like, okay, she's going to be doing stuff with music, and that just kind of falls off. So you would think that, and Uhura thinks that, well, you're going to obviously turn this down because this is a mission to go to this planet for a dig, but it's going to involve the Romulans, and you don't need all that. And she says, no, I'll go. Really? Well, clearly this is a big opportunity for the Federation, and it's a big opportunity for me to do this excavation. So I'm going to go along with this. What we find out later is that team that came along and ended up experimenting on Dr. Benar and all her team was the dead brother that we talked about earlier, the Gleek of the story, Relan. Relan was in charge of that command. And during one of the digs, during the first dig where they find the Eurasian building or the city on that planet, she has a flashback and she tries to kill Dajan at that point, which is not really good. You don't want to be doing that.
No.
But this sets up this whole, we have a bunch of things that start to then spill out about, well, isn't this a coincidence? Well, isn't that a coincidence? Isn't this other thing a coincidence? And you realize that all these rules that were set up by the Romulans were probably people who were opposed to what the provisional government was doing, trying to derail this entire proceeding.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So you have, people paired together who things are going to go horrible when they happen. And there's also another thing that happens very early on, which I think they were anticipating was going to happen, although they didn't tell. I don't think they told Tim that, by the way, when you go on this mission and you meet up with the Federation, chances are the Wonder Twins are going to defect.
Right.
Which they do.
Yeah.
And Tim seems upset about it, but I'm wondering, he's not really as upset as he should be. And I'm thinking, well, maybe he did know all along that this was another thing set up to derail things, because we find out that he's aware that this stuff is all set up that this was doomed to fail. One of the things that the Romulans do, apparently to, make sure people don't realize this right away, is, well, who's going to head the Federation team that goes to the planet? And they say, well, we don't really care, except there's one person we don't want, and that's Ambassador Sarek.
Yeah.
Who do they bring instead? We find out that it's Thomas Riley, who has mentored under Sarek. And when Riley comes on board, we get our mentions out of the way right away about the 2 episodes of Star Trek he was in. We get references to him trying to take over the ship and the constant playing of "I'll Take You Home Again, Kathleen." So there's all that stuff is out of the way right away. We get that taken care of. He seems fairly competent when they sit down at the negotiations table, but he has a strategy very early on that we don't get to see how it would really play out. And knowing that the person he was negotiating against was Tiem, it wasn't going to work out no matter what he did, because Tiem's mission was not to make this work.
Right.
But he pushes this point, which had been pushed before by the Federation to the Romulans, that the probe, the destructive probe, the probe that almost wiped out life on Earth, is heading in the direction of the Romulan Empire. And the Romulan Empire's reply is, your lies, your fibs.
Yeah, it's all a story.
Yeah, they're big probe deniers.
We'll have nothing of this.
Yeah.
So Riley tries a tactic of, in order to open these negotiations, he tries to get Tiem to admit that the probe, which is now, I think, has already crossed over into the neutral zone,
Mm-hmm.
is there and is headed into the Empire, and Tiem won't do it. And so Riley just gets up and walks out of the room. He says, well, if we can't agree on the basic facts of anything, then this is useless. And so it's like left hanging, saying, look, we are going to walk out of these negotiations, even though you think it's going to be you. We're walking out because you won't even, admit that a thing that's actually a thing that you can scan for is a real thing. We don't get to find out how Riley deals with this, because he's out for the rest of the story, pretty much at this point.
Well, he was in a coma or something for the
He was. And so his assistant has to take over, who I was going to be have portrayed as Don Knotts, as seen in the Scooby-Doo meets Don Knotts episode.
Well, Andy.
Well, sir, you're negotiating with them Romulans, and so
Yeah.
I mean, he's okay. He doesn't like completely fall apart, but he's clearly not prepared for this. He's meant to be the assistant in these negotiations. So Tiem is kind of able to like walk a little over him in these regards. So there's so many incidents that happen like this in the story. But eventually what happens is the probe is coming into the Romulan Empire, and it happens to go past a planet whose name is virtually impossible to pronounce. So I said, I went online and said, you pronounce it online. So it's Will RIV. It's WLAARIIVI. Now, I don't know. It must have been pronounced in.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how Jimmy Doohan said it. I don't remember that name even coming up, or not close to that anyway.
What happens is that on this planet, the Romulans are doing experiments on a species. Now, apparently they had been doing other things, and the other stuff wasn't working out. The other stuff they were working on, so let's shift our attention to just torturing these little creatures. Well, guess what those creatures were? Those creatures were the species on that planet that the probe had identified. And so now the probe is headed in that direction. So it's time to reach out to talk to that species. And all it's getting is cries for help. They're killing us. So,
Turn on the steam ray.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's that. And of course, the Romulans accused, oh, the Federation, blah, 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 blah. We told you it was coming. What more do you want it to do? So things are falling apart really fast between everything going on. They do find this, I don't know how to describe it, on the planet. It's a remnant of the Edosian Empire, but it's not like it's not a recording. It's kind of this statue, something like that has a bunch of writing on it, but like more like symbols. And of course, this is one of the places where music ties in, because the Arisians were also very much centered around music. So they set up their cities where you could find your way around if you understood their musical language. And it had been studied for decades by people in the Federation, the Romulan Empire, other places. And you could get a little glimpse of it. So you could kind of go places like through their maze of streets. But I don't think it was necessarily a Rosetta Stone, but it was something that they had found in other Arisian cities, but never an intact one. And the ones that they had found kind of led to these dead worlds or burned out stars. So maybe this one holds the bigger picture of that stuff. And they can crack the code enough to get a projection of what it's showing. And what it shows is thousands and thousands of points. But when you start to map those points out, it's more of the same. It's more of these dead worlds, burnt out stars, just like, well, if they were there ever before, they're not there now because there's nothing there now. And it's kind of a letdown, because we thought this one was going to be the one that got it all solved. So meanwhile, the probe is still headed into the Romulan Empire, and the negotiations have broken down to the point where they're recalling their crews. But the Federation says, well, if they aren't going to do something to try to deal with this probe, we're going to have to do it. Spock thinks he's got some basic idea of how to communicate with the probe. He thinks that in true Trek fashion, if you can modify the deflector shield
and reverse the polarity.
Right.
What he's basing this on is the fact that when the probe came to Earth, you never saw anything. No beam or something came down to start all this, the boiling of the ocean. None was detected. It was as if it went from the probe to the Earth with no time lag in between. The same communicating with the whales. It just was there. So Spock speculates that the Edosians were telepathic. And so he thinks he can replicate that type of thing with the deflector shield. So they're going to go and try to stop the probe, to get it to turn around, to do anything at all. They have a recording of the probe, which is great, except no one can understand what that's all about. But as they're playing it back, Jandra, who's really listening to it for the first time, says, wait a minute, it repeats. There's a pattern in there, repeats, and no one else can hear this pattern. She says, no, listen. And everybody's like, what? That's when Uhura says, oh, wait, I hear it. Yes. It turns out that on this mission, we haven't discussed like another character that's in this thing.
There are a lot of characters.
Yeah.
There were a lot.
Suffice to say, there were a bunch of musicians on board the ship. Okay. So a lot of them can pick it up as well. So it ties in with music. And some can pick up more than others. Spock is still a bit baffled. He can't, and Chandra says, well, listen at these really low frequencies down here. And he's able to isolate it enough to go, yes, okay, I got it. But it's not enough by itself. It doesn't mean anything. But they figure, all right, with that much, we can at least get the probe's attention and see where we go from there. So that's their big plan, is they're going to go off and try to, talk to the probe now that there's no conference to be dealing with anymore.
Right.
Well, of course, the Romulans go, well, how are you going to get all the glory? We're going to do this as well. And Tim, who's a linguist, what a surprise, thinks that he's also figured out how to deal with the probe. So you get to a point where the Enterprise is sending out this message to the probe, and the probe is interested because it's got what it refers to as one of these tiny bubbles of air that
That's
these
how they refer to
mites,
the ships. Yeah. The people are the mites and the bubbles of air are the starships.
right. So they are speaking to the probe, but then the probe slowly realizes, wait a minute, it's just kind of mirroring back something that I put out before.
Oh, I have to change my mixer. I'm getting echo.
Yeah. Feedback.
So it's thinking about what it's going to do when all of a sudden another ship is doing the same thing, because the Romulan ship shows up and they are using a different method to shout at the probe.
And in true Romulan fashion, they think, well, we can't let the Enterprise communicate with them because then they'll have control of this as a weapon.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
They'll turn
right.
it against us. So we have to get control of this weapon.
Oh, they're smart. They make things go.
Which makes the probe really confused. And as angry as this device, which doesn't even have a space inside for any creature, so they know that it's not occupied because there is no giant cavity in this entire thing, with one minor exception, which we'll get to. So they're communicating with this, with the probe, and the probe goes, I can't figure this out. I don't know what to do. I've been told to listen for a species speaking the true language, but they're not really speaking it.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of speaking it. So it decides to go home and have the creators explain this, how do I deal with this? And you figure, okay, so the probe is going to leave, talk to the creators and come back. Oh,
Wait,
no.
What other probes we've seen that did that?
Right. But
The
it decides,
ships are going for a ride.
yeah. Suddenly there's the Enterprise and the Romulan ship going along
Mhm.
at warp
12
bazillion.
Yeah.
So there's a point at which, and no one can really breathe on the ship when this first starts up, because it must be doing some dampening. The probe is doing some dampening.
Oh, yeah. Everybody froze in mid motion.
Right.
Oh,
and
yeah, that's right.
they're trying to draw breaths in. And it was just like a giant weight on them, and they just couldn't do it. And that lets up
Turning into
finally.
salamanders.
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah, they were turning into salamanders.
Maybe that's all to avoid that, just in case. I'm just going to do that thing.
Yeah.
Now the probe gets back to the creator's planet, and the Enterprise is scanning it. Of course, the Romulans are scanning it as well, and they don't see any signs of life. And the star in this star system, the solar system is just a kind of a poor little shell at this point. And the probe is going, well, where are the creators? Where are they? And it's trying to suss that whole thing out. While the scanning is going on of the planet, both the Romulans and the Federation and the Enterprise crew realize that there are buildings down on the planet's surface that might give us a clue about what the heck is going on here, because surprisingly enough, they cannot hear the internal dialogue of the probe. So the Romulans are the first to head down to the planet, and they find this domed space, and they are trying to figure out what's going on. They're trying to use their equipment, which is kind of second-rate stuff. And Kirk is like, "Oh, we got time to head down there because they're, they got inferior stuff." I thought was kind of weird. He was very nonchalant about heading down to the planet. So nonchalant, he leaves his communicator behind when he goes. And they all beam down. And the Romulans see them, but they're too busy working on what they're doing, except for one guy who's staring at them, because it turns out that, what a surprise, several of the people who are, aides to TM were also in on this whole thing, even though he didn't know that they were in on it. So he's another person who's like the spy trying to, derail the entire stuff. It's like levels upon levels upon levels of stuff going on.
I know they were weaving such a crazy web of deception and lies. I was like, I don't understand. I kind of got lost there for a little bit because it kind of went deep.
Yeah, I was starting to go, I'm starting to check out at this point because I'm kind of lost. We got the probe story, we got this conference story, they're not really meshing together. And I don't think they ever really do mesh together.
Right.
But the Enterprise crew is able to get enough information from what they see for Spock to realize maybe I can communicate with the probe. What they see is when the Romulans and the Enterprise crew are down there, along with Chandra and some other people, suddenly the room changes.
Almost like a holograph or something.
Well, this giant hologram of things that kind of look like, I forget if they said dolphins or porpoises.
They called them super whales, but they said they look more like dolphins.
Right. So
yeah,
they're
super whales.
They're swimming around all over the place, right? And then the room starts to fill up with water. Water, again, hologram.
Yeah.
Of water. And that's when Spock says, "Oh, I think I figured out what's going on here."
That's when you need the Wonder Twins.
And shape of water there. But so they're
an ice cube.
They're ready to beam back up, and the probe goes, "Oh, I need to check the same piece of, by coincidence, the same piece of technology down there that the Romulans and the Federation just happen to be around." It doesn't even realize that they're there. No, it does. It says there are mites down on the surface, but it doesn't care what they're doing. So it makes contact with this device, this column thing, and the same effect happens to everybody on the planet who's around it. That same, I can't breathe, everything's moving in slow motion type of thing happens to them again. And what the probe is doing is it's sucking up all the records of everything that was left on the planet and finds out information about what happened to the creators and what was going on here. We get the impression that we're going to throw in the third thing here. It's like, okay, we already have the probe. We already have this peace thing going on that's tentative in this government. And what else can we throw in? Oh, let's throw in the Borg.
Yeah.
Because the Borg apparently had intercepted the probe at one point, and it knew its memory was damaged. It didn't know from what. It just remembers encountering square bubbles of mites. And then suddenly it couldn't remember anything, like this gap in its memory. What the Borg had done was found out, where are you from? And went to that planet. And so the creators kind of fought them off, but it pretty much used up whatever they had left. And we're not really sure. It's left unclear as to whether or not they were able to escape someplace else or not, but it's really kind of tentative. So Spock talks to the probe and tries to explain, we just, we're friends. Don't destroy us. And so it stops doing what it's doing. and it listens. It takes a long time, but they're able to explain slowly how they came to be in talking with the probe, what their mission was, which was not dissimilar to what the probe's mission is, and says, like, some of these things you call mites, they might end up being the species because the probe was only looking for water-based species, right? It became very clear. One of the clues was bubbles of air, right?
Mhm.
And another one, talking about trying to communicate with the whales. And on this planet that it destroyed, we talked about that one in the neutral zone, they were water-based life forms. So the creators who were water-based, essentially, whether by intent or not, had the probe only looking for water-based life forms. And anything that was like in little bubbles in the air or, running around on these planets was like, it's like there's a little mite, just going around. So they convince it, hey, maybe you might want to just not destroy those things necessarily. That might be a good plan as well. And it goes off. It's still trying to find the creators now, because are there any of them left? And it's still doing its other mission at the same time. But hopefully it's not going to be doing what it did to Earth. The negotiations clearly completely wiped out that this is not going to happen. And it's doubtful. Matter of fact, we're pretty well sure that the team that was tentatively in power is not going to survive in power. One of the things that tells us that is because of all the stuff that the people interceding to trying to set up all these restrictions, they want to have somebody defect. If you have somebody defect, that does not reflect well on the people that decided to have this peace mission. You want there to be some destructiveness with the probe and all sorts of things, just to say, look, Federation lies about this. This is something that came from the Federation. So we're pretty sure that they're just going to lose this battle and not stay in control of the Empire at that point. And the story ends happily with Chandra giving a performance at Lincoln Center. Huzzah. And there's a lot I left out, which is hard to believe, but so I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I have 13 at least people unique to this story, as well as Riley and the crew of the Enterprise and Cartwright and the president of the Federation.
Yeah, they kept introducing people, and after a while, I was having trouble trying to keep them all separated, mainly because they were alien, they're like Romulan names. And
also, they would, like I said, they would show up here, and then 200 pages later, there.
200 pages later. Yeah.
Or an hour and a half listening time or something later.
Yeah.
So I found the book exhausting.
It was. I had to listen to it in 2 parts. In fact, when I came back, I went, "Where are we?" let's listen to that last chapter again. All right, are we rating this?
And by the way, I was gonna say the same thing that Chuck had said. But I didn't listen to it in 2 parts. I listened to it all in one big session. I was at my parents' this last week, and it's a 2-hour ride to my house, so I listened to pretty much the whole thing driving to my house. So yeah, it was maybe splitting it up. I probably would have digested it a little bit better, but it was like, wow, that's a lot.
So, and by the sound of it, again, even though one of the things that Craig and I were talking about pre-show, I don't know if we mentioned it during the story itself, the episode itself, that there's a lot of cases where something happens or something is explained to someone, and then wait 2 paragraphs, that thing is happening and someone's explaining it, or you're experiencing it a second time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, is there any need for that? So I think that we'll talk about this more when we talk about the manuscript, when I get that read. And I'll hopefully this is true, but I think what was happening here is that the people that had to come in and rewrite this
You're right.
was another one of those cases where a lot of notes from Paramount and Pocketbooks and the publisher and all that kind of stuff, and very short amount of time to do it in, because they were not going to put it out like in April of 1992 rather than 91, and possibly trying to mention characters that are going to be an upcoming movie or something, that they were just throwing everything in the book at it with no time to edit out.
Yeah.
No, I've mentioned this twice. I should just do it once.
Ooh, add the Borg.
Yeah, and add the Borg into
Time
it.
travel. We need time travel.
Yeah.
Well, they did mention time travel, and at one point, and I think Kirk had the common sense to say, maybe it's not a good idea to mention time travel to the Romulans. That's a thing.
Yeah. We got in trouble with that.
Let's not get into how the whales.
What are we rating this book on?
Oh my
Whales,
goodness!
Space whales. Super
Space
whales.
whales, super whales. That's right. There were super whales. McCoy's super whales. McCoy was
They're like
particularly-
regular whales, but they have a shield with the family crest on it.
McCoy was
Yeah.
particularly grouchy in this story.
Before we rate it, I know Chuck mentioned it, but I noticed that we didn't mention early on that James Doohan actually did the whole book, narrated it.
He does a great Scotty impersonation.
Well, that's
by
what
the
I said. Yeah, it absolutely spot
Actually,
on.
Not much else.
There was a couple of times he was doing Kirk, and you could tell he was. I thought he was doing a pretty
But
decent
the
job with
McCoy,
Kirk.
in the one that I listened to, which is the book that you had, Craig,
Mhm.
the McCoy was like, "That's not McCoy. That's weird."
His Spock was a little weird too.
Yeah, Spock was like very
Well,
off.
but he did a good job, I think, even though the character voices may not be exact. I think they were different enough to help separate some of that stuff. But even with so many characters, you can imagine. I mean, it's not like LeBlanc, trying to do all the, Warner Brothers voices. But he did a good job.
It's like when my kids used to ask me to read Harry Potter and do the character voices. Like, no, Dad, that voice sounds a lot like this. Like, I only got so many in the bag.
Right.
They all sound like me, okay?
Right.
All right, I'll go first on this one, and kind of like one of those things. I'm going to put a little asterisk next to this because this is rating this book, not understanding the drama that went on behind it. So it's the same I'll do with the manuscript when I looking at that one as well. I'm giving this one I'm going to give this one a 3.5 super whales. I felt like you had some interesting ideas in here, but things just didn't really gel together, and it became such a mishmash of agendas and subplots and character introductions
Mhm.
and missed opportunities,
Complete ideas. Yeah.
So why do you introduce Riley and then for the rest of the book he's in a coma? What's the purpose? Why bother?
Yeah. Yep.
And you don't even get a lot of what's going on in his head. He's having this internal drama that's going on in his head, but it gets you in the book, the print book is like a couple of pages total about that in a 343 page novel.
Mm-hmm.
So what was I didn't see it. So I like the little bits and pieces, but in total, 3.5 super whales.
Probe. Please read over back beginning
What?
to end.
Oh, no. All
All right,
right.
who's next?
Go ahead, Chuck.
I give it 4.
Hmm.
Similar reasons. Very, very tough to follow. It was. If I was reading it, it would not be a page turner. So fortunately, it was kept short. That was like the only saving grace is like, wow, this is going really quick.
Right.
I have to listen to the audiobook afterwards. I'll complete the trilogy of this
Yeah.
tale. You know?
I've read what it was supposed to be, and I listened to it and read the book. That's maybe Clinton.
So you
then
like
you-
it? Well,
And you can watch the YouTube short.
Right.
there's an animated version as well. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm also gonna give it about. I'm trying to decide. I'm kind of split between the difference between the 3.5 and a 4.
3.75.
Yeah, 3.75. It was I went into this going, okay, we're gonna find out more about the probe, which we did, but then we found out about everybody else in the galaxy. You know, that they threw in here. I just, like you said, it just became a mess, and I was having trouble trying to keep a lot of it together because it seems like the Romulans were just treachery after treachery after treachery. I was like, oh gosh, forget it.
Did I mention there was an Andorian in this who you get to be introduced to and you never hear from again? Did I mention-
Yeah. Hey, how you doing? All right, see you. So I'm gonna give it a 3.75. There you go. I'll split
All
the
right.
difference.
I think that makes a lot of sense. All right. So I don't know whether it will be next episode or not, but I will give a truncated review of Music of the Spheres, which is the manuscript. And I also have to even understand at that point that that's the manuscript turned in. Manuscripts are often edited for various reasons, even the best of manuscripts. So this one doesn't have that layer on it, as far as I know. So I will keep that in mind when I'm. But this is really what would have been grabbed to build this Frankenstein's monster from. I guess I'm not being very kind to it still, am I?
No.
All right. But with all that said, it's time to refill the dilithium chamber and try to warp on out of here. You
Yeah.
can find me, Clinton, at Comedy Forecast, all one word, with the number 4. And I'm getting ready to put out another episode in the next week or so, which will be a Detective Heart story, which I think I talked about that before. The big story is on its way. I have audio from people that are in this very podcast. You know,
What?
so yeah, it's crazy. So look for some of that coming up as well. All right, and who speaks for you guys?
I
Go ahead,
played the
Chuck.
Andorian.
Yeah.
Oh, he's cut.
Yeah.
Cameo
You're
in
out.
the book doesn't work.
Right. Go ahead and tell everybody where you can find us, Chuck.
Right there on the right side of the screen.
No.
Oh,
Yes, but no.
Craig and I do a podcast called Technorama. If you haven't heard of it, well, you look for Technorama podcast on the internet and it'll bring you right to our site at chuckchat.com. We do a lighthearted look at tech and science and all kinds of fun stuff that nerds, well, middle-aged nerds like to. We're narrowing down the scope of this. Middle-aged nerds with, never mind. You can find us at chuckchat.com and we know you're going to love it because
Yep.
3 other people do.
That's right. Hey, there's 60 years of podcasting experience on this podcast alone.
All righty.
God,
Well, with
you
all
just
that
made
said,
me feel even older. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
with all that said, it's time to hit the theme, boys.
Dark blue.
If you like the show, please be sure to tell a friend about it and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Follow us on Blue Sky at The Topic is Trek, visit our Facebook page, or call us at 816-TREKKER. That's 816-873-5537. Until next time, on behalf of Chuck, Craig, and myself, I'm Clinton, thanking you for listening. And as we always say here on The Topic is Trek, don't put
put
on
on
the
the
red.
red shirt. Makes
like
you
these
look like a-
guys.
It makes you look like a whale.
What? Now that's a large shirt. And we are done. All right. Well, thank you for everybody who was watching this live or after
Afterwards.
the fact. We appreciate you. And we'll be back again in a couple of weeks. I'm taking a trip. I'm not sure if that's going to interfere with our schedule, but we'll be back sometime soon. Hopefully, we'll also get a premiere date for Strange New Worlds at some point in the near future as well.
In the end of July, we'll find out when it comes out in August.
All right. But bye-bye for now.
Bye.
All right.